it's Justine here, and for those of you who are new to the channel, I am a third-year medical student at USC, and with the new school year starting, it got me thinking about things that I wish that I had done when I was a pre-med, so I wanted to share this with you all today so that you can learn from my mistakes and have a good college life, application cycle, and ultimately do really well in med school too. So let's get right into it. So the first thing I would do if I was just starting out as a new pre-med is to start using high-yield study techniques. And what I mean by high yield are techniques that are supported by research to improve your overall retention and academic performance. So generally, these techniques are going to require more active recall, making your brain work harder, and therefore allowing you to retain the information for longer. So in terms of high-yield study techniques, there are really two that are the mainstay amongst medical students and seem to be getting popular amongst pre-meds as well. But there are also a couple that I wanted to share that I feel are very much underutilized still. So the two most well-known high-yield study techniques are spaced repetition and practice questions. And both of these techniques are very well supported by research in terms of their efficacy for test-taking purposes. And for spaced repetition, the app that most students use, which I use as well, is Anki, which is a free app that you can use on your phone and computer, and you can also use a whole bunch of different add-ons to kind of customize the experience for your needs. In terms of practice questions, I do use UWorld, which is what most medical students use, and I know that they also have an MCAT question bank that can be helpful for pre-meds. In addition to these, I also want to share some of the high-yield study techniques that I have personally used that I think are very much underrated. So the first is the Feynman/teachback method. So I mentored a student who, while she was taking her OChem classes and bio classes, would have a small study group, and they would each assign one another with a topic that they were going to teach to the group. And she did really well in her courses and found that to be helpful for her. And so the idea behind using this Feynman/teachback method is that in the process of refining your understanding so that you can teach it to other people, you're going to learn a lot more, and also through the real world experience of talking about the topic and also getting feedback from other students and answering questions, asking questions about this topic, you have a much more robust understanding of the topic. So along the same vein of real world experience really improving your learning and retention, I think that a very much underutilized study technique is to go to office hours. And I know a lot of people hate to go to office hours because they find it very daunting to have all of that one-on-one attention with the professor and be scrutinized and feel just kind of dumb. But the fact of the matter is, you're gonna be a little bit dumb because you just don't know much about the topic and you're talking to someone who is an expert. So part of being a pre-med and also being a medical student is realizing that you have gaps in your knowledge and that you are getting time with people who can help you fill those gaps and therefore make you smarter. So I would try to think of it that way, that every time you go to office hours, you are making yourself a little bit smarter. And I personally would try to compile a list of questions that you have that are not easily answered by just Googling it, and then take those with you to office hours, and maybe you can even bring a couple friends with you if that makes it more fun. I know that I did that in the past, and I found that when I went to office hours, I really retained the knowledge from those topics much better, because once again, getting that real world experience and also having a little bit of that adrenaline and the kind of fear of dealing with office hours and kind of interacting with your professor one-on-one does make you remember things much better. And I personally had attending physicians who have told me that they still remember some random fact from first year medical school because they were asked questions about it by a professor back when they were a third year. So do not underestimate this technique. And also it's a great way to kind of get to know your professor, which is ultimately gonna make it easier for you to get letters of recommendation down the line. So multiple benefits both for your learning and for your application. As a bonus, if I were starting out as a pre-med at this time, I would also invest in a good note-taking app and probably a tablet as well. I use GoodNotes and I have an iPad mini, and I use it all the time in clinic to keep myself organized and also not to have to carry around a bunch of paper, which I absolutely love. And the nice thing about starting this habit when you are a pre-med is that you can reference your notes much later on. So in addition to GoodNotes, there's also Notability, which is really popular, and if you want Other more free or cheap options, there is Apple Notes and OneNote, and all of these should allow you to do both handwritten and typed notes and be able to search those notes for later. And that is really powerful because once you're a first year in medical school, you are going to have some overlap with some of the pre-med courses such as biochemistry or physiology and anatomy that will benefit you. Also, starting with a good note-taking app is especially beneficial for some of the earlier pre-med courses such as organic chemistry, where you are going to have to draw a lot of diagrams, and it's helpful to be able to have that handwriting ability. The ultimate goal of using these high-yield study techniques is to become highly efficient in your studies, retain knowledge long-term, and ultimately save a bunch of time later down the road. And trust me, you're going to be so happy when you don't have to memorize glycolysis for the 5th time in a row. The second thing that I would absolutely do if I was starting out as a pre-med is to prioritize developing a healthy morning and evening routine. In medical school, I've definitely seen people struggle because they don't really have a good sleep routine and they still try to cram, and they ultimately end up struggling both academically and emotionally. Having a set morning and evening routine where you make sure to get through things that are priorities for you will pay dividends not only in terms of your career but also your overall well-being. And let's be honest, burnout is real. Things that I like to prioritize for my morning routine are exercise and getting whatever is my top to-do list item done before I have to go to work, because I find that that is when I am the freshest and that's when I'm able to kind of get my most important work done at a really high quality. So sometimes this could be doing Anki, doing practice questions, or it could be doing research, making sure that that is done and I can have that sense of relief when I start my workday. And the third thing that I would absolutely do if I was starting out as a pre-med is to make sure to find a hobby outside of medicine. These are the kinds of things that are going to keep you balanced and grounded during the toughest times of your journey as a pre-med and a medical student. Not to mention, for better or worse, medical schools are valuing more and more what are the unique characteristics that you can bring to their class, including things that are outside of the standard pre-medical curriculum. On a related note, I do highly recommend taking a gap year before you start medical school, whether that is to work or to travel or do something else. Not only is this going to give you a new perspective that will help you to be more balanced once you start medical school, it'll also give you more time to actually prepare your application and maybe add some unique experiences that you otherwise wouldn't have had access to. And finally, the fourth thing that I would definitely do if I was starting out as a pre-med is to learn things that are going to be very helpful for you down the line, but you're just not going to have time to do once you're in medical school. So the major one that comes up for me is language learning. And specifically, if you're in many parts of the United States, learning Spanish is going to be critical and it's going to be so helpful to your patients who are primarily Spanish speaking. Other skills that come to mind that can be super helpful once you're in medical school but are very hard to learn once you've already started are coding, biostatistics, and basic sciences lab research. All of those things can be used to complement your medical practice in various ways depending on your interests. However, they're very time intensive to learn a lot of the time, and so it can be difficult to have on top of your already demanding medical school schedule. In addition to these more career-oriented skills, life skills like cooking, doing laundry, cleaning the house are things that you should definitely try to get down pat before you start medical school, because by then you're going to want to be really good at it so that you don't have to spend so much time on it. In summary, if I were to start pre-med today with the knowledge I have as a third-year medical student, I would 1. Start using high-yield study techniques as soon as possible, 2. Develop a healthy morning and evening routine, 3. Find a hobby outside of medicine that I really enjoy, and 4. Start developing skills that will be really helpful to me once I start medical school but are hard to find time to do once that time comes. So that is the end of today's video, everyone, and thanks for watching. I hope it was helpful, and let me know if there's anything that you would add to this list or things that you found particularly helpful. Bye! See you next time.